I can describe the rotary engine pretty simply by saying it's dead. And it's been dead, really dead, since 2012. That might sound harsh, but think about it. When was the last time you could walk into a dealership and buy a brand new car with a rotary engine? For most of you, the answer is never. You weren't even born. Here's the strange part. The rotary wasn't killed because it was bad. It was killed because it was too good at the wrong things and too bad at everything else. It was, by almost every measure, one of the most brilliant engineering ideas the car world ever produced. And it destroyed nearly every company that touched it. So, how does an engine this loved, this advanced, this legendary, end up extinct? That's what we're here to figure out today. The story doesn't start in Japan. It starts in Germany in the 1950s with a man named Felix Wankel. Wankel had an idea that sounded almost too simple. Every normal engine wastes enormous energy turning the up and down motion of pistons into the round motion a wheel actually needs. Pistons go up, pistons go down, valves open, valves close. It's violent, it's complicated, and it's full of parts fighting each other. Wankel asked a question engineers had been asking for 100 years. What if you skipped all of that? What if the engine just spun? That's the rotary engine. Instead of pistons, it has a triangular rotor that spins inside an oval chamber. Same 4 stages as any engine: intake, compression, combustion, exhaust, but happening smoothly, continuously, as the rotor turns. No piston slamming, no valves, almost no vibration. Just spin. On paper, it was a miracle. It was tiny, a fraction of the size of a normal engine making the same power. It was light. It had way fewer moving parts, which meant in theory it should never break. And it was smooth in a way pistons could never be. It could spin to insane RPMs without tearing itself apart. By the early 1960s, the rotary was the most exciting idea in the automotive world. Big names lined up to license it: Mercedes-Benz, Citroën, General Motors. Everyone wanted in, and almost all of them would walk away. NSU's rotary car, the Row 80, was beautiful and advanced. It also broke so often that NSU spent itself into oblivion, paying for warranty repairs. The engines wore out far too soon. NSU collapsed and got absorbed by the Volkswagen. The rotary had claimed its first victim. Everyone looked at the rotary, saw the problems, and quietly backed away. Everyone except a small, almost broke company on the other side of the world that was about to bet its entire existence on it. That company was Mazda. And to understand why they did something this reckless, you have to understand where they were. In 1960s, Japan, the government wanted to consolidate the car industry into a few big players. Small companies like Mazda were terrified of being forced to merge or simply disappear. They needed something that made them special, untouchable, something no one else had. So Mazda put together a team of engineers known inside the company as the 47 Samurai, a nod to a famous Japanese tale of loyalty against impossible odds. Their mission: take this broken German miracle and actually make it work. The biggest problem was something engineers grimly called the devil's nail mark. The tips of the spinning rotor would chatter against the chamber wall and carve deep scratches into it, destroying the engine. This single flaw had defeated everyone. Mercedes couldn't solve it. NSU died trying. Mazda's engineers attacked it for years. They experimented with dozens of materials for the rotor tips, and eventually found a seal that worked. In 1967, Mazda launched the Cosmo Sport, one of the first reliable rotary cars in history. Suddenly, the small company from Hiroshima had something nobody else on Earth could build, and for a while, it looked like the future. Through the early 1970s, Mazda went all in. They put rotary engines in everything: coupes, sedans, even pickup trucks. The engines were smooth, revvy, powerful for their size, and unlike anything else on the road. Mazda's whole identity became the rotary. It was their flag, but the rotary still had 2 secrets it was hiding. 2 flaws that no amount of clever engineering could ever fully fix. And in 1973, the world found the first one. In October 1973, the oil crisis hit. Fuel prices exploded, gas lines stretched around blocks, and overnight, Americans started caring about one number they'd ignored for decades: miles per gallon. And here was the rotary's first dirty secret. Because of how it burns fuel, that long, oddly shaped combustion chamber, the rotary was thirsty. Really thirsty. A rotary Mazda could drink fuel like a car twice its size. In an era of cheap gas, nobody cared. In an era of rationing, it was almost a death sentence. Mazda's American sales, which had been climbing fast, suddenly cratered. The company that had bet everything on the Rotary was now staring at bankruptcy. They came dangerously close to collapse. The Rotary had nearly killed its own creator. And here's where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Instead of abandoning the Rotary, Mazda doubled down, but smarter. In 1978, they took the engine's real strengths: lightweight, small size, smoothness, high revs, and built one perfect car around them. A small, light, balanced sports car, the RX-7. This was genius. A sports car buyer doesn't care much about fuel economy. They care about how the car feels. And the Rotary, in a lightweight sports car, felt incredible. It spun freely, made a sound nothing else could make, and put the weight low and central for perfect balance. The flaw didn't matter anymore. The magic did. The RX-7 became Mazda's icon. Through the 1980s, it got faster, sharper, more advanced, eventually adding turbochargers. And then, in 1992, came the one everyone remembers, the third generation RX-7, the FD. To this day, people argue it's one of the most beautiful cars ever made. It used a complex sequential twin-turbo Rotary, cutting edge for its time, making serious power from an engine barely bigger than a suitcase. It was the Rotary's masterpiece. It was also the beginning of the end, because the FD exposed the Rotary's second secret, the one Mazda could never solve. That same continuous spinning that made it so smooth also meant the engine burned its own oil by design and ran extremely hot. Those famous apex seals, the part Mazda spent years perfecting, still wore out far faster than a normal engine's parts. Rotaries developed a reputation for needing rebuilds when piston engines were just getting started. A well-treated Rotary could last. A neglected one could die shockingly young. The result was a generation of horror stories, expensive rebuilds, and a quiet fear in the back of every buyer's mind. Then came the killer, the same one chasing every interesting engine: emissions regulations. The Rotary's biggest weaknesses, burning oil, running rich, incomplete combustion, were exactly the things tightening emissions laws punished most. Making a Rotary clean enough to pass modern standards meant strangling the very things that made it special. By the late 1990s, the math stopped working. The RX-7 got too expensive, too thirsty, and too hard to certify. It left America after 1995 and finally ended production in Japan in 2002. But Mazda wasn't done. They believed. They tried one last time. In 2003 came the RX-8 with a new Rotary called the Renaissance and clever rear hinge doors. It was praised, it won awards, and for a moment it looked like the Rotary might survive into the new century. But it carried the same old curses. It drank fuel, it drank oil, and emissions laws kept closing in. In 2012, the RX-8 was discontinued, and with it the Rotary engine, as a car you could actually buy, died, 45 years after Mazda bet the company on it. Here's the part that really gets me. The Rotary didn't lose because it was a bad idea. It lost because it was a brilliant idea pointed at the wrong century. Everything that made the Rotary magical, that smooth, endless spinning, that willingness to rev forever, came from the exact same design that made it thirsty, oil-hungry, and dirty. You couldn't separate the genius from the flaw. They were the same thing. Fix the flaw, and you killed the magic. And there's a pattern here that goes way beyond cars. Sometimes the most beautiful engineering isn't the most practical. Sometimes a company falls in love with a technology so completely that it spends decades and nearly its own survival, keeping a dying idea alive. Mazda never had to build Rotaries. Piston engines were cheaper, cleaner, easier, more reliable, but the Rotary was theirs. It was their identity. And you don't give up your identity just because the spreadsheet says you should. The strange epilogue? Mazda never fully let go. The Rotary recently crept back, not as an engine that drives the wheels, but as a small generator quietly charging an electric car's battery. And here's the real question I want you to think about. Was Mazda crazy to keep the Rotary alive for 45 years? Or is there something admirable about a company that refused to give up on a beautiful idea, even when every number told them to? Because I'm honestly torn. My head says the Rotary deserved to die. My heart hopes Mazda brings it back one more time.